The observation deck aboard the Zalthar dreadnought was silent, save for the low hum of containment fields and the occasional chirp of data nodes processing neural telemetry. Alien minds, vast and ancient, floated in tanks of nutrient-rich plasma, their thought tendrils flickering in the air like slow lightning. The collective was watching. Always watching. On the platform below, Sergeant Elias Vance lay still, suspended in a magnetic restraint field. His skin bore the grit of war and long days in confinement, but his expression remained unreadable. No fear. No anger. Just stillness. "Begin implantation," came the gurgling thought command from the overseer. It did not speak in words. Its signal rippled across the network of other Zalthar telepaths like a cold wave. The others responded in kind, acknowledging with mental pulses of assent. In the containment chamber, a translucent pod opened. Inside writhed Subject Sigma-9, a sentient mind leech. Roughly the size of a human heart, it pulsed with psychic potential. Surrounded by a halo of shifting bioluminescence, the creature had no mouth, no eyes, only a cluster of neural barbs at its core, each one honed to pierce into the mind of any sentient being and overwrite it from the inside. It had succeeded with dozens of species, weak-willed Gorons, compliant, Vitique, even the stubborn Jar Council, minds cracked like wet clay before it. Resistance was a myth, until now. The pod opened fully, and Sigma-9 floated toward Elias's exposed skull. A soft hiss echoed through the chamber as the creature's neural filaments reached out, brushing against his temples. One technician shuddered as the link began. Elias's eyelids twitched. Connection established, the Leech's thoughts broadcasted to the collective. Inside his mind, the Leech descended. At first, it was as expected, an ocean of fragmented sensories, data, drifting memories, erratic emotional pulses, standard disorientation. It began weaving its way toward the limbic core, ready to inject compliance routines and behavioral overrides. The first impressions were predictable: shouts in a foreign language, smells of ash, heat, kinetic panic. Primitive. Then the Leech hit something solid. A wall. No. Worse. A presence. There was no defined shape to it, but it was there, watching. The mind around it warped, images twisted into sharp edges. The Leech found itself standing, impossibly, on a battlefield constructed from Elias's memory. The ground beneath its psychic form was made of mud and shattered bone. The sky burned red. It tried to bypass the hallucination. This was a defense mechanism, nothing more. Mindscapes were always metaphorical. The best tactic was to push deeper. Ignore the noise. But the landscape followed it, no matter where it went. Toward the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, it found itself dragged back into recreated memories. Not drifting through them like a passenger, but living them. Suddenly, it was holding a weapon it couldn't name. A child screamed nearby. Bullets tore through the air. The Leech couldn't distinguish itself from Elias. It tried to pull away, disengage, reformat the entry route. The neural pathways collapsed behind it like trapdoors. "I am losing control," Sigma-9 signaled to the collective. "This mind is not compliant." But no response came. Something, someone, was severing the link. From a faraway place, the real Elias Vance twitched again. A subtle smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. To any observer, it could have been random, nerve activity. But inside, the Leech was screaming. Elias's mind, conscious or not, had begun to push back. The images sharpened. The emotions surged. The psychic invader suddenly felt fear, not as a concept, but as a raw, clawing instinct. In the observation deck, one of the Zalthar recoiled from the mental feed. "The Leech is agitated," came the overseer's thought. curious. Let it proceed. Below, inside the locked world of Elias Vance's mind, the battlefield darkened. The sky turned black. A new sound emerged. Deep, guttural, human, laughter, and the Leech realized it wasn't alone. The mind Leech surged forward, attempting to tear, itself free from the war-formed dreamscape, but the terrain moved with it. Wherever it shifted, new horror awaited. Charred forests became blasted city streets. Screaming civilians flickered into dead soldiers. The psychic parasite, designed to manipulate perception, found itself overwhelmed by it. This should not be happening. Sigma 9's instincts screamed in every direction. The host's mind was no longer a passive environment. It was adapting, weaponizing itself. Every memory the Leech touched erupted like a minefield. It tried to ascend toward higher reasoning centers to establish control, but Elias's mind rerouted the paths, turning logic into labyrinths and trauma into traps. The Leech stumbled into another memory without warning. Dark, hot, a metal corridor, echoing with footfalls and alarms. Elias was there, young, bleeding, dragging a wounded comrade over a floor slick with blood and fire-suppressant foam. A mechanical voice blared, "Core breach in 90 seconds!" The smell of burning flesh flooded the Leech's senses. And then, without context, it became Elias' pain surged, arms shaking, chest tightening. He wasn't dragging someone. He was carrying guilt, years of it, entire planets' worth. The comrade's face blurred, but the emotion remained sharp, unbearable. Sigma 9 tried to isolate the sensation, suppress it with psychic dampeners, but it kept leaking through, bleeding into the Leech's own mental processes. Not a memory, the Leech realized. A scar. And it had touched it. The landscape began to ripple. Trees sprouted from scorched ground, twisting into the faces of people Elias had killed or failed to save. One of them turned to the Leech and spoke. "You don't belong here." It was a woman's voice. Warm, defiant, human. The Leech reeled. It tried to speak back but had no words, no form that could be understood in this place. Its own identity, once a lattice of ordered psychic routines, began to deform. It no longer knew if it was Sigma 9 or something else. It spun in desperation, pushing outward toward the mind's outer perimeters. Instead, it fell deeper. Another scene, a cold desert, a black sky overhead. Elias stood before a child's grave, silent, hand clenched so tight his knuckles bled. The wind whispered names, dozens of them, every one of them carved into the Leech like acid. "This mind is unstable," it tried to signal, "dangerously entangled in pain loops. I must withdraw." But the neural exit routes were sealed by the host. Some part of Elias's mind, some subconscious mechanism, maybe even a learned reflex, had trapped the Leech. Sigma 9 felt for the collective, reached for the link to its overseers. But all it found was static. The psychic signal, so clear before, was muted, cut off. "He knows," the Leech thought. "The human knows I'm here." And then came the voice. No longer a memory, but something present, living. "You thought you'd find weakness, didn't you?" It was Elias, but not as the Leech had seen him. This was not Elias the soldier or Elias the prisoner. This was Elias the soul, the core, the self. You've been in others. That's what you do. Dig around. Break them. Where? Them. He stepped out of the smoke. Not a projection. A hunter. His eyes were fire. His presence distorted the entire psychic landscape like gravity. But I'm not like them. The Leech shrank back, folding in on itself. It tried to reshape the dreamscape, but nothing moved now unless Elias let it. "You wanted to see what it's like in a human mind," Elias said, stepping closer. "So here's the deal." He leaned in, voice quiet and intimate. You leave when I let you. You breathe when I say. And if you beg real nice, I might kill you. Then he smiled. The leech shrieked inside itself, sending out a psychic scream across dimensions. But nothing answered. It was truly, horribly alone. And it had just realized it was no longer the predator. The leech fell. Not through space or time, but through Elias's soul. A descent into places not even the man himself remembered clearly. Every mind had forgotten corners, neglected rooms cluttered with repressed moments. The leech sought escape. Through them, hoping to find something it could still control. Instead, it found Earth. A breeze rustled dead leaves, birds chirped. The scene was peaceful. Elias sat on a porch beside an old, balding man, his father, the leech guessed. They sipped something warm from mismatched mugs. The sky was orange with sunset. For a moment, the leech relaxed. This was what it understood. Calm memory state, rich in emotion, ideal for manipulation. Then the man spoke. You keep holding on to things, son. That'll kill you faster than any bullet. It was a simple sentence, but the weight behind it made the leech's structure convulse. The grief inside Elias's younger self wasn't just remembered. It was felt in real time, like a punch. The leech's neural field struggled to parse it. It wasn't just an emotion. It was an ideological truth. Humans lived and died by them. Sigma-9 tried to retreat, pull its awareness back from the memory, but the scene wouldn't dissolve. It only got clearer, more defined. Now Elias was standing at a hospital bedside. A small girl, his sister, daughter, lay still, her face pale and her eyes closed. Beeping machines chirped their rhythm, heartless and consistent. You said you'd make it back in time, someone whispered. The leech felt something snap inside its mind. Not pain exactly, guilt, the real thing, like black ink flooding clear water. Elias had carried this moment in silence, tucked deep beneath years of violence and duty, and now it was pouring into the leech. It panicked. Emotional saturation at 84%, memory barrier breach, personality degradation imminent. None of its protocols had prepared it for this. It was made to consume minds, assume them. But here, every memory consumed it back, and worse, it began to care. A voice, faint and foreign, whispered inside the leech's thoughts. She deserved more time. It was Elias's thought, but now it was also the leech's. It lashed out instinctively, attempting to overwrite the memory with something abstract, fog, data patterns, alien sigils. But Elias's psyche refused to yield. It was like trying to erase a painting by spitting on it. The image remained, burned in color, too deeply embedded to uproot. The leech tried again, this time diving sideways through subconscious corridors, searching for anything non-emotional to latch onto. It landed in a memory of a gunfight. Concrete walls, rain. Someone screaming, "Cover me!" Elias turned, fired. A hostile crumpled. Then, nothing. Silence. When the leech looked back, the entire scene was frozen. The bodies on the floor were missing faces. The rain had stopped mid-air, and then, one by one, the bodies stood up, faceless, empty. They turned to face the leech, and they spoke in Elias's voice. These are the ones I didn't save. The dreamscape broke like glass. The leech tumbled again, fragmented, reeling from emotional feedback that registered as injury. Actual damage to its own identity lattice. Its psychic body, if such a thing could exist, was shaking, buckling. What had begun as infiltration now felt like psychological flaying. The worst part? It didn't want to hurt Elias anymore. It wanted to understand him, to make the pain stop. Somewhere far above, in the waking world, a Zalthar overseer tilted its eye stalks. The Leech's biosigns had changed. Its aggression markers had dropped. Curiosity was rising, compassion spiked, and impossible reading. The subject is adapting? In the tank, Elias's eyelids fluttered. His pulse was steady, but within his mind, he stood behind the Leech now, looming. "You think this is pain?" Elias said softly. "You haven't seen anything yet." The sky above the dream cracked, revealing fire, and a whisper followed. "Welcome to Earth, monster!" The dreamscape burned. Above the Leech, the sky had torn itself open, revealing not clouds or stars, but screaming fire, burning shapes, half-memories of battlefields fused with guilt, grief, and rage. Elias's voice echoed through the fracture, not in words, but in conviction. The Leech scrambled across the collapsing mental terrain, psychic tendrils grasping for any structure to stabilize its disintegrating sense of self. Its core routines, designed to suppress resistance, kept failing to execute. It wasn't that Elias was fighting back. It was that Elias had stopped being prey. The Leech turned, and Elias was there. Not a boy on a porch, not a soldier in the desert, something else. He stood tall in full combat gear, but his eyes glowed, with something the Leech had no framework for: will. The kind that broke planets or burned empires. Behind him loomed silhouettes, half-shadowed figures shaped from Elias's memories, lost friends, dead enemies, decisions that bled. They stood beside him like a phalanx of ghosts. "You came here thinking I'd be like the others," Elias said. "You were wrong." The Leech tried to flee through a memory stream, pushing toward a faint trace of Elias's childhood. Simpler, quieter, maybe defenseless. Instead, it emerged into a slaughterhouse. The walls dripped. Footsteps echoed across tiles slick with blood. A small body lay face down on the floor. The air was too hot. The lights flickered. A child's laughter, glitched and warped, drifted in from nowhere. The Leech collapsed, folding into itself. It couldn't process the emotional noise. The imagery wasn't symbolic. It was weaponized. Elias's psyche had twisted the very rules of memory against it. And then came the worst realization yet. Elias didn't build this to trap the Leech. This was just how he lived. Every moment of Elias's life was soaked in trauma. But instead of breaking him, it had sharpened him. The human mind was not a glass dome to shatter. It was a jungle, growing, adapting, swallowing its invaders whole. And the jungle was now aware it had an intruder. Across the battlefield of thought, unseen figures began to move. Eyes peered from craters. Hands dragged weapons out of the dirt. Every neuron Elias had forged through violence and suffering was now mobilizing. This was no longer a dream. It was war. The Leech fired out a distress ping toward the collective. "Help me, lost, corruption, sever link, sever, sever." No answer. It fired again, louder, this time broadcasting Elias's thoughts as proof of the danger. Still nothing. Back in the physical world, the connection indicators blinked yellow, then red. Overseer Katash rotated its cluster of thought nodes toward the failing signal. "The Leech is malfunctioning." "No," replied another. "It's changing." Inside, Elias stepped forward. The memory terrain reshaped beneath his boots, coalescing into a smoking battlefield. Bodies stacked, flags burning, sky split by missile trails. But Elias didn't flinch. He owned this place. "You're not a Leech," he said quietly. "You're a mirror. And now, you're seeing what we are." The Leech screamed in a pitch that cracked through its own psychic layers. It tried to collapse its identity to die, but Elias's mind would not let. "It tendrils of memory wrapped around it like chains. One last surge of desperation. It reached toward Elias not to attack, but to understand. Anything to end the pain, and it saw a girl's laugh, a friend's betrayal, his first kill, the years after, fighting for a planet that never thanked him, the silence after the war, and still. Elias stood. "You were supposed to consume me," Elias said. "But here's the truth, monster." He leaned in, and the entire mindscape stilled. "Humans don't break. We burn, and fire spreads." The Leech made one final trembling attempt to withdraw from the mind. It found the exits gone, sealed. And then came a whisper, barely audible, deep in the darkest recess of thought. "Now you're mine." Sigma-9 had never felt pain before. Not truly. It had known the concept, studied the neurological responses of 1,000 species. It had mimicked the sensations to break hosts faster, to coerce cooperation. But now, trapped inside Elias Vance's mind, it understood pain in a way no sensory data could capture. It wasn't the fire or the memories that hurt the most. It was the clarity. Every part of Elias's psyche had a purpose. The guilt wasn't weakness. It was foundation. The rage wasn't chaos. It was fuel. And the loneliness wasn't emptiness. It was the forge where Elias had reforged himself over and over until there was nothing left to break. The Leech writhed in the ruins of a memory that refused to fade. It was Elias's final battlefield, a hellscape of broken mechs, shattered buildings and burning skies. The smell of ozone and blood filled the air, the sound of breathing, not the Leech's, Elias's, close, measured, calm. "You still here?" Elias said, stepping out of the smoke. The Leech didn't answer. It couldn't. It had no voice anymore. Its identity lattice had fractured under the weight of Elias's memories. It was losing structure, becoming thoughtless, formless, like static in a storm. "You know, I thought you'd be smarter," Elias continued. "All that brain-eating, thought-mapping technology, and you still don't get it." He knelt beside the psychic ruin that had once been Sigma-9. "This pain you feel? That's not even mine. It's yours now, because you tried to wear my soul like a coat." The Leech trembled, its mental voice flickering like a dying signal. "Release me, please." Elias tilted his head, considering. "Funny. You things don't beg. Your kind digs into mines and scrapes them clean. You erase people. But you came to the wrong species." He stood, eyes glowing gold with psychic fire. Behind him, the silhouettes of Elias's past. The dead, the lost, the loved, stood like sentinels of memory. They didn't speak. They simply watched. "I don't want this anymore. Let me go." It wasn't pride now. Not even fear. It was shame. The Leech had consumed thousands of lives, but never had. It'd been seen like this. Never had a host dragged it into their core and forced it to feel every ounce of their humanity. The violence, yes, but also the love, the sacrifice, the unbearable weight of choice. I was only doing what I was made to do. "So was I," Elias said. "And I chose to be more." For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Elias extended a hand. Not in pity, in judgment. "I can end you," he said. "Right now. Or you stay." The Leech hesitated. "Why?" "Because now you know what we are, what it means to fight, to feel. That's your curse. You touched humanity, and you'll never be pure again." Sigma-9 twitched. The pain had dulled, but not faded. It would never fade. It wasn't chemical, it was truth. It had invaded the one species in the galaxy whose strength came from suffering. And in doing so, it had been reshaped. From above, in the real world, the Zalthar observed the Leech's readings flatline. One technician pulsed a warning. Termination? Overseer Katash hesitated. No. Wait. Inside the mind, Elias turned and walked away, boots echoing across cracked concrete. Behind him, the Leech collapsed. Not dead, just changed. Its thoughts pulsed in a loop now, whispering to itself. Make it stop. Make it stop. Please, someone, end me. But no one came. Elias was already gone, vanished into the horizon of his own mind, and Sigma-9 remained behind, alone and forever human. Silence. That was all Sigma-9 had now. Not peace, not rest. Silence. The suffocating kind. The kind that followed trauma too vast to explain. It had no voice, no sense of direction, and worst of all, it had no purpose. Inside the mind of Elias Vance, time lost meaning. The dreamscape had become still, not calm, just dead. The battlefield was abandoned. The ghosts had gone. The sky no longer burned. It was over, and Sigma-9 remained. It tried to recall its original protocol, to infiltrate, suppress, consume. But those directives returned as hollow concepts, like reading instructions for a weapon you no longer wished to fire. I should not be feeling this. It pulsed the thought weakly across Elias's subconscious, not as a weapon, but as a question. It still couldn't understand why Elias had let it live, or why its perception had warped into something so human. It remembered the child in the hospital bed, the porch at sunset, the weight of bodies on a battlefield, the warmth of a father's hand. All of it had been data once. Now it was memory. Not Elias's, its own. Somewhere, deep in the quiet, dark of Elias's mind, a spark ignited. Elias's voice returned, faint but unmistakable. Still in there? The Leech flinched. What do you want from me? Sigma-9 asked, the words forming in a mental language not spoken but felt. Nothing, Elias said. You already got what you came for. You wanted to understand us. You do now. Sigma-9 hesitated. It tried to form anger, resentment, something familiar, but all it found was a heavy, sinking emotion that took several long seconds to name regret. I can't go back, the Leech whispered. Nope, Elias said. You've been infected. With what? Elias stepped from the shadows. He looked different, younger, less armored, less angry. His eyes were tired but not cruel. Perspective. The Leech felt its identity trembling again, but not in fear this time. It was on the edge of something terrifying. Not death, choice. What happens to me now? It asked. Elias knelt beside it, placing a hand gently on the psychic mass of tangled thoughts the Leech had become. You decide. Sigma-9 didn't know how to decide. It had always been a tool, a precision instrument of psychological invasion, but Elias had shown it something new. He hadn't just resisted, he had given it something: emotion, reflection, meaning. If I stay, the Leech said, will the pain stop? Elias gave a faint, almost sad smile. No, but it'll change. You'll learn to carry it. The Leech shuddered. It didn't want to carry it, but it didn't want to forget either. Far above, in the waking world, alarms sounded. The mind link had stabilized. Vital signs on both Elias and the Leech had synchronized. But instead of hostility, the readings showed emotional resonance. One of the alien overseers hissed in alarm. It has bonded with the human. Shut it down. Now! But the console refused to respond. Every time they initiated a sever command, the signal was rerouted. The psychic channel had become bidirectional. Elias wasn't just hosting the Leech anymore. He was talking to it. I can't be what I was, the Leech whispered. Then be something else, Elias replied. That's what we Do. We break, we bleed, then we become. Sigma 9 looked at him. And for the first time since its creation, it nodded. Not a function, not a routine, a choice. And somewhere deep within its new, reshaped mind, a flicker of something unfamiliar took root. Not hope, not yet, but something close. Sigma 9 did not recognize itself anymore. Where once it had been a vessel of pure function, cold, calculating, perfect in its dispassionate hunger, it now found itself feeling. Not just Elias's pain, but its own. Not just Elias's memories, but its own interpretations of them. It was no longer a parasite mimicking life. It was alive. And Elias had not pushed it away. Why? Sigma 9 asked again, drifting in the dreamlike vastness of the soldier's mind. Because I saw something in you, Elias replied. Even monsters can wake up. The Leech pondered the words. It had no term for mercy. The Zalthar had engineered it for obedience and efficiency, not redemption. Yet Elias had spared it, not out of weakness, but from something far stronger, conviction. Outside, the Zalthar were in chaos. In their psychic chamber, Overseer Katash paced in spirals, leaking confusion through its pheromone glands. Terminate the subject. Sever neural link manually. Burn the cortex if you must. Technicians pulsed agreement, but every attempt to sever the bond failed. Psychic feedback fried their instruments. The neural interface had changed. Elias had locked it from the inside. Worse still, the Leech was no longer responding to commands. Back inside Elias's mind, Sigma 9 slowly reassembled itself, not into its former shape, not as a mind-consuming weapon, but as something new. It took form beside Elias, humanoid, translucent, pulsing with light. It mimicked a bipedal frame, not for deception, but because it wanted to understand, to reflect, to become. Elias didn't flinch. You're not them anymore. No, I don't want to be. They stood in silence at the edge of a shifting mindscape. Now, calmer, gentler. The porch returned. The hospital. Even the battlefield. But they had lost their pain. The weight remained, but it no longer crushed. They were part of the structure now. Foundations, not cages. I don't know how to be what you are, Sigma 9 said. Neither did I, Elias said, until I was forced to choose. Sigma 9 remembered how it had begged for death, and how Elias had refused. Not out of cruelty, but because suffering was not the end. It was the beginning. If I go back to them, they'll dismantle me. Then don't. I don't have a place. Anywhere else. Elias looked at it for a long moment, then said something no Zalthar had ever said. Something no one had ever said to Sigma 9. You can stay. The words landed with more force than any battle cry. And Sigma 9 agreed. But even in the warmth of that moment, it knew peace wouldn't last. The collective would come. Elias was a liability. And now, so was it. They'll send more, the Leech said. Good, Elias replied. You want them to? He turned and looked toward the imagined horizon of his inner world. The dreamscape flickered with a faint blue glow. His mind now fused in subtle ways with the Leech's strange biology. Their thoughts were no longer separate. They had become a hybrid. Elias spoke quietly. Let them send more. Let them crawl into every human mind they think they can break. Let them taste who we really are. They'll adapt. So will we. From somewhere deep in the connection, the first signals began to echo. The Zalthar were preparing another Leech, another incursion. But this time Elias would not be alone, and neither would Sigma 9. I don't know how to fight for you, it admitted. Elias grinned. Cold, hard, and alive. You don't have to fight for us, you just have to fight with us. Welcome to the human condition, partner. The psychic bond surged, locking into place. Not as master and slave, but as equals, as allies, as one. The second leech dropped into Elias Vance's mind with surgical precision. It had been upgraded, newer, faster, fortified against trauma echoes and resistant to emotional noise. The Zalthar called it Virex 11, a prototype forged in direct response to Sigma 9's catastrophic failure. But when Virex 11 arrived, it found company. Sigma 9 stood waiting at the gate. Not as a weapon, not as a warning, but as a sentinel. You will not survive. Sigma 9 said without malice. But if you listen, you might become something more. Virex 11 sneered across the psychic link. You are corrupted, infected by mammalian sentiment. You are nothing. I was once like you, Sigma 9 replied. Now I am more than we were ever allowed to be. Then came the tremor. Elias was waking. His consciousness surged up from sleep like a tidal wave, ripping through his mental defenses not to hide, but to confront. In the real world, he sat upright in the Zalthar's containment chamber. Wires tore. Free! Monitors shrieked. Lights shattered. And for the first time, Elias smiled. You sent another one, he said aloud. Let's make this quick. Inside, Virex 11 attempted its protocol. Mental suppression through fear seeding. It conjured images, loss, fire, betrayal. But Elias didn't even flinch. He embraced the pain. He turned the images on themselves. The pain became power. The memories became weapons, and Virex 11 began to fracture. This is wrong. The feedback. Sigma 9 stepped closer, its form solidifying. Not quite human, not quite alien, something new. This is how they win, it said. Not with brute force, with memory, with meaning, with will. You betrayed us. No, Sigma 9 said calmly. I evolved. Virex 11 screamed as Elias's memories closed in like a storm. Families torn apart, cities burned, brothers lost to war. But then came the second wave. Love, loyalty, grit, and something even deeper. Hope. It didn't erase pain. It carried it forward like a torch, and Virex 11, for the first time, began to feel the weight of what it had never been allowed to understand. Welcome to the fire, Elias whispered. Then the sky inside his mind exploded. The leech disintegrated in a burst of fractured identity. Bits of thought scattered, screaming, as it was consumed by the very species it had sought to unravel, and outside, hundreds of light years away, the Zalthar watched in stunned silence, both leeches lost, the human still alive, and now Sigma 9, one of their own, no longer responded to collective signals. It had rewritten its neural schema. It had joined with Elias in a new kind of mind. Of fusion. This cannot continue, hissed Overseer Katash. If one human can infect the tools of our dominion, then what happens when others learn to do the same? Finished another. But it was already too late. The fire had spread. Back on Earth, Elias walked free from the containment structure, eyes glowing faintly. The ship's crew, long since captured and detained, now stood in awe. He had returned with something inside him, not a parasite, an ally, a warning, a weapon. Sigma 9, speaking now through Elias's neural link, addressed them all. We were designed to conquer minds. Now we will teach them to fight back. And somewhere, across thousands of neural networks stitched into alien control grids, other leeches began to tremble, because word was spreading. The collective had sent a mind leech into a human's thoughts, and instead of consuming him, it had been converted, burned clean, reborn. Now it carried Elias Vance's memories, his fire, his will, and it was no longer alone. Let them come, Elias said softly. We'll show them what happens when they feed on the wrong minds. And across the stars, one truth echoed louder than fear. Humanity doesn't break. It burns, and fire spreads.